And thank you for joining us tonight. Your interest in the future of our property and your community is important to us and greatly appreciated. My name is Jody Spiegel. I'm the Senior Vice President of Development at First Capital Realty, the owners of this 28-acre former Mr. Chrissy's site at Lake Shore and Park Lawn. Okay. First Capital Realty owns 167 properties across Canada in our major urban markets of Toronto, Montreal, Vancouver, Calgary, and Ottawa. You may be familiar with some of our local developments, such as Liberty Village, Yorkville Village, One Bloor East, Leaside Village, and the newly redeveloped northwest corner of Yonge and Lawrence, which is on the bottom right there. We built our head office in Liberty Village, where we also own many retail and commercial properties, and an exciting new mixed-use development on King Street West that is currently under construction, a truly mixed-use project that includes 506 new rental apartments, a daycare, shops, offices, and restaurants, all adjacent to a planned Smart Track GO station connected to the West Toronto Rail Path. We are committed to working and consulting with the community as broadly as possible. As long-term investors and property owners, good relations with our neighbors is critical to our success. From our perspective, addressing the short and long-term needs of the community is how we create long-term value. Earlier this year, we hosted an idea fair right here in this hall to introduce ourselves and some members of our project team, advise you about our aspirations for our property, and gather your ideas and opinions from our neighbors about what's important. At that idea fair, we were overwhelmed and inspired by the level of interest and enthusiasm demonstrated by the residents from this community. On that cold February night, and I think I recognize faces that were here then, I've lost my spot there, sorry, on that. More than 600 people attended to speak to us directly, share their thoughts on interactive display boards, and complete the detailed comment forms that we had made available. We are here again to further discuss the big ideas that emerged at that idea fair and to introduce a major addition to the project team. We have placed display boards around the room, and they are accompanied by senior executives from First Capital, experts from Toronto-based and internationally renowned planning consultancy Urban Strategies, senior transportation planners and engineers from the BA Group and Hatch Engineering, as well as Arup Engineering, and several members of our outreach and communications team. Please take the time to review the boards, ask questions, and discuss your interests directly with any of the members of our team. We also have comment forms available and have recently created a website for this project where you can contact us and keep up to date on any news. Before we disperse and continue our individual conversations and review the display boards, I have a very special introduction to make. When we bought this property, we knew that we had a unique opportunity to put our best foot forward and be community builders. We recognize that owning this significant piece of Humber Bay Shores is a big responsibility. To ensure that we realize the potential of this property and its relationship to the community around it, we commissioned a 6-month international competition to find a master planner with global experience in projects of this scale. We wanted a firm that could truly apply best practices from around the world to the Canadian context, and we found them. A firm with a very impressive CV of built master plan projects. That firm is Allies & Morrison, an award-winning architecture and urban planning practice based in London, England, and we are very proud to have them lead the master planning exercise here in South Etobicoke. To tell you a little more about their firm, their experiences, and how they approach developing a master plan, it is my pleasure to introduce Alfredo Carabello. Alfredo is a prominent architect and master planner who has worked all over the world and is now looking forward to adding Humber Bay Shores to his firm's resume. Please welcome Alfredo.
Thank you, Jody. We are incredibly delighted to be here. We feel very, very privileged to be working this very exciting project. in this very exciting city. So I can talk a lot about ourselves and our master plan experience, but first we wanted to talk a little bit about what we had ahead of us. That is, what is a master plan? And there are some few slides, and I've been given a strict limit. I wanted to talk about for 45 minutes, but apparently I'm not allowed to. So there's going to be some cars telling me that I'm talking too long, and I already spent there 30 seconds that I should be using probably with the slides. But what is a master plan? That we are not designing buildings, we are designing something else at this. And in a sense, a master plan is like setting up the rules of the game before playing the game. So you start thinking of how these different elements are going to come about, how is your strategy, but then once you play the game, obviously the game is a different thing. That you know in advance how all the different actors are with the different rules come together, you plan your strategy, and hopefully if you did all these things well, you win the game. But obviously the game is not the plan. In a sense, it's also a process of deciding then how, once you have these rules, to decide, like cooking, how much do you want of what, when you are going to put that, and where. So it's an element to then deciding and choosing the right ingredients for what is effectively, in master plan, a slow cooking, because this process takes long time. In that respect, a master plan is a process. It's not a product. It's not an instant thing that you buy and you get. It is, well then, obviously being here with you with this series of open houses and gathering ideas is part of that process. So you start something with with a brief, with a vision, with an ideas, with ingredients, with some rules, and off you go. And in our master plans, what we have discovered doing them is that it always evolves, it changes, it has different shapes as you move. At any given time, you might stop and say, well, it looks like this, but carries evolving like any part of the city. And master plans are the result of many hands and many voices. It's not a singular hand or a singular trace of someone that have a great idea. It's many people coming together that have different roles in this process. But hopefully, if we all together are pointing in the same direction, and then you have all the different members of the crew of this process are, thinking alike, then we might get there. There are several things that a master plan should do. And a master plan, in a sense, should give the sense of a place to come. So we are, in a sense, starting to imagine a place that is going to be here in this side, and then we do many different things to try to illustrate that place to come with the drawings, with the sketches, with the models, and so on. Because in a sense, it's all how all these ingredients come together in a place where you would like to live, where you like to work, where you would like to shop, where you like to basically walk around. One of the things that is very important for us in our master plan is to exploit the potentials of the existing. There's no such a thing as an empty site. Right now, obviously, seems like there is nothing there, but the site has history, that has context around, have a climate, have the lake, have the winds, and so on. And in a sense, we like to bring that potentials of the existing into our master plan to make a place of the place. This is Lucca in Italy, and these houses were planned in the old traces of a Roman Colosseum. The Colosseum is not there anymore, but the houses done in between the 12th and the 15th century keep the memories of what was there. So there's no more Colosseum, but the traces of the existing have determined the way of place, and it's a fantastic square, and there is a very good restaurant over here if you ever go there. A master plan is a process and takes long time, so it should be able to flexible. That's a fundamental thing. If we become very rigid about what the master plan will be, the master plan will fail. So it should be flexible to accommodate the uncertainties of the future, because if there is only one thing that we know about master plan, is that they change. So you have to provide a robust framework that observes the flexibilities of the uncertainties of the future, but with a clear direction of where we are heading for. And one thing that is very, very important also for us is this, what we call a frame for diversity and familiarity. And this is a very a fundamental point in our work. Like any part of a city, it should have diversity. But the best parts of the cities have a certain degree of familiarity, so that then the houses or the buildings belongs to a family. They are similar to one another. And we like to use this image of a British artist called Damien Hirst, in which each of these obviously are individual. You recognize them, they have different shapes, they have different colors, but they all belong to the same family of fishes. And we would like our buildings and our master plan to have that degree of cohesion in which you recognize the individuals, but all together create a family. How have we done this before? And there are several things, several master plans, and in a sense we are going to run very quickly through some of them. So for us, the most important thing is how you stitch the city and reconnect. And several of our plans in London and in other parts of the world have been about repairing parts of a city that were damaged or were abandoned or were in huge change. This is the site of the London Olympics 2012 before we arrived to the project. So it was an industrial wasteland that have this cemetery of washing machines and fridges. There were a canal in which, there used to be dead bodies and ugly stuff happening there because it was in a sort of very abandoned part of the site. And we were commissioned, part of a big team, to rethink all the site for the Olympics in 2012. And what was different about this is that we were not only thinking about the 2 weeks of the Olympics, but the legacy post-Olympics, and how this could be a catalyst for the regeneration of East London. So we did these 3 models. This is the model of the site as it was, in which all this area was basically industrial sheds. Then there was the model of the 2 weeks of the Olympics, in which you see the stadiums and velodromes, but crucially a new park that then stitched the east of the west of the site. And then the real game changer, that is then after these 2 weeks of crowds and events and so on, how then the city just came through and created a sort of new connection between what was 2 disjointed communities. So we did this diagram that is very abstract, but it doesn't really matter. This is just to indicate that before we arrived to the site, there were only 4 connections between this and that. And after we did the master plan, basically you have, I think it's 18 or 22. And these connections, what they create is that then the city just carry on. It's like capillarity, like blood then could flow from one side to another, creating a new series of bridges, a new series of connections that became ways in which you can cross from one side to another, across a great new park. This is the biggest new park in London after Green Park and Regent's Park and so on. It's a Queen Elizabeth Park that has been a huge success for the whole of the city. First spaces, then buildings. Which is not a great thing to say for architects. We like doing buildings. But in a sense, we understand that the role of a building is to be a background for life. And then the spaces in between buildings are almost more important than the buildings themselves. And many of the cities of the world have been defined by great spaces. So if you can name one building around Central Park that is not the Guggenheim, then I'll give you a cookie. So the Central Park is a series of ordinary buildings. Some are tall, some are low, some are mid-rise, but what matters is the space in between the buildings. That is what is the icon. That can be, the same could be said about the great Parisian boulevards, in which a series of buildings that are, each of them are great buildings on their own right, but what really matters is the boulevard in between, or Las Ramblas in Barcelona. That is exactly the same thing. There is the Mercado de la Boqueria, and then there are other things, but the buildings are background to this space. And it's something, in a sense, that also we have incorporated in our master plan. This is a Greenwich Peninsula in London that have a sort of a great new central park. This is the Millennium Dome, in which then that park is framed by a series of low buildings, tall buildings, mid-rise buildings, and so on. And what we did was a series of cardboard models not of the buildings, but of the spaces. And then how you start calibrating the distances between the buildings, the height of the buildings, to then create the spaces that are desirable, and so on. And this is another of our very big and important master plans in London, the King's Cross, in the very center of London. Another area that was a sort of a post-industrial abandoned at the, almost semi-abandoned at the time, with two great train stations at the center, but very cut-out area for the rest of London. And then we did a master plan trying to re-stitch this to the rest of the community. And really, the beginning of the master plan was this very abstract drawing. That was the drawing of the spaces. It's a drawing of the squares, it's the drawings of the streets that then tied together this side that was almost like an island, disconnected of the rest of the city, to the community. What that has provided, and this drawing was done in the first year of the competition, 15 years afterwards, it's still looking more or less like that, so it was good enough. And that has provided a series of new squares, new gardens, new parks, and so on. This is and the first thing that the developer did was to build this square. It's called Granary Square, in front of a listed building that was completely adopted by the community that started to go there in the weekends before any office building or any residential building was even built. That have been subsequently then added for more. So this is St. Pancras Square, another garden on the side, and this canal that was also was a little bit dodgy at the time, was also recovered, and right now is a fantastic place to go. We think that this site, 2150 Lake Shore Drive, it is big enough to be considered a piece of city rather than just small development. And as a piece of cities, you have this diversity and familiarity that I was talking before. So this is a photograph of a street in New York. And what we enjoy here is that variety between tall buildings, mid-rise buildings, small buildings that give sort of a grain and diversity that you find in New York. You walk 3-5 blocks and then you find this and so on. How can this diversity that has been done throughout time can be incorporated in something that is starting anew? And in several of our projects, we're talking about this thing that we call, it's very architecty, but a typological ensemble. That basically means how you can combine different type of building together in the same block. Rather than having just a small building or mid-rise building or just tall buildings, how you can combine all these within the same blocks and within the same master plan. Some people like to live in townhouses, some people would like to live in tall buildings, some people would like to live in 8-floor buildings, and so on. So you provide diversity and opportunities for everyone. And this is one project that we are right now building in London, in which there were some existing low buildings, to which we added from, these are existing, and all this is new. And then how the buildings that we were adding, some were low, some were mid-rise, and some were tall, generated that then we were studying them, each of them separately, came together in a piece in which then whichever way you enter the site, then you have different buildings coming together. So you have this layer of small buildings, mid-rise buildings, and tall buildings that again create a sort of a piece of city that then adapts to the existing area, and then there are sort of new tall buildings on that side, creating something that belongs to the grain and the character of London around public spaces and then connect back to the existing city, creating tall buildings that have certain robustness and all clad in brick with terraces and gardens at different level, creating then this balance between the lower scale, mid-rise scale, and high-rise scale. And this building is right now being built. And so this is sort of the low rises that then relate to this existing Victorian pub. And then as you move across, then you have this sort of a mid-rise building that always respond to the scale of the Victorian buildings in front of it. And then the tower is being built as we speak. And finally, in this part, we want to make what we call a place of the place. These series of principles that are at the heart of our practice, and these are some of the master plans that we have done around the world, they are principles that we feel that are at the heart of the act of master planning, but each master plan that we do is very different. So this is an extension of Canary Wharf in London, and it's about tall buildings and mid-rise buildings and so on. but it's about, well, it rains a lot over there, and then how you incorporate this into the character of a London buildings. This is a master plan in New York, and then how you incorporate also this in super high rise over there and make these buildings urban. This is a project in Singapore on then how that open spaces and train stations and gardens and tropical climate comes into play in the way in which we design the spaces. This is one in Malaysia, and then how also these verandas and tropical elements come into place. Another one in India, close to Ahmedabad, that is a sort of a drier and hot climate, and then have a completely different character. One in Doha, in Qatar, that is being built, and then how you incorporate that into the tradition of Islamic architecture. And finally, the biggest one that we have done, that is, well, it's the scale of a small city in Oman, is 250,000 people, enormous site that is going to be something going on for 40 years. How all this experience then come together into 2150 Lake Shore Boulevard? And at the moment, we are just starting, gathering ideas, and trying to understand the nature of the site and the nature of a problem. And there are just 4 key things that we would like to leave with you today, because we are really starting to understand the site and to understand the challenge ahead. The first one is this notion of in-between. And one of the things that struck us about the site when we were doing the competition, it is this notion of how the site is in between different conditions, in between the Gardiner Expressway, the train line, the ravines that come very close by, the lake, but also the Toronto, the downtown. And in a sense, we feel that this site has a hinge condition that is going to have different responses to the different sites, and then start to solve the transition between these different conditions, between the green, the white, the speed. And this notion that for us is quite interesting, that some people will perceive this site as they move in their cars or they move by the train, and so people are going to walk through it because they're going to live or shop or work there. This links to the notion of a connected place. So for us, it's very, very important then that this site becomes the heart of the whole of this. It has the size and the opportunity to become a place that you go to, but also a place that then is connected through all these potential green links in relation to obviously the park on the lake and the ravine and so on, and how you connect the notion of going to the site, but also attracting elements of the greenery around you. And obviously links then to this point of green and urban. In a sense, we feel that obviously you are not in the center of downtown Toronto, you are outside, but also you have all this source of basically the blue and the green. And then we were looking at cities that this is, you might recognize, this is Florence in Italy, in which you have all these sort of iconic elements and of the Duomo and the Palazzo Vecchio on the Uffizi. But one thing, go there often, one thing that is very interesting about Florence that is not that seen is the amount of greenery that you have there behind walls and in roof gardens and so on. And we felt that Toronto, and this area in particular, has that. How that is going to then be incorporated into a master plan in different ways, in sort of obviously the public realm, into the sort of terraces of the buildings and so on. And there are many different examples of how this has been done in some of our master plan and some of the work around. And then finally, active and diverse. So in a sense, because this is a piece of a city, we feel that this has to have something for everyone. So that there are something for people living there, for families, for young people, for senior people, for community, for shopping, for education, for civic, and so that in a sense is the things that we find in the active and sort of intense and desirable cities that we all love. These will provide then a sort of a variety and diversity of shops that then you go and eat and buy things and spend time there. You might have then different spaces for working of different nature, and I have 1 minute left, it seems, which is good. there are many different offers of spaces for living, and hopefully all this thing coming together will create a new heart for the area and a place for everyone. Thank you very much. I'm told that there's no question here, but the architects are strategically located close to the pierogies and coffee over there, so we will be more than happy to talk to you, and we will be over there. Thank you very much.